welcome to Rodenburn Reads. My name is Emily, and this is my channel where I love to talk about cozy, wholesome, and most of the time vintage books, or books written prior to the 2000s, if not like before 1980s. I just like older books. It has been a good while since I've been able to film a video, so if you're new here, hello, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here and you decided to check out my video. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for your patience. February was a month. There's a lot of sleep deprivation and sickness and all that, and I sat down and tried to film a January reading wrap up at one point, and I never was able to finish it. I filmed about half of it and it just never happened. So I thought, you know what, clean slate, we'll just start over. I'm going to talk about a few of the books I read in January and a few of the books that I read in February, and we'll just go from there. I definitely read significantly more books in January than I did in February because, again, we were sick for the second half of the month, and my baby, who is around 7 months old, he learned how to crawl about a month ago, and so he was up and down all night, and he's teething, so all that fun stuff. Sleep deprivation, sickness, yeah. It was a month. So, it's not March. We're halfway through March, so I'm really hoping that I can get this video up this weekend and see how it goes. I have a book haul video I want to film. I have a book video about spring books to read that I want to film, but whew, man, mothering is a busy job and sometimes it's hard to squeeze in filming. That being said, I want to try and keep this one a little bit on the shorter side, so let's just go ahead and dive right in. So 2025, I feel like the end of 2024 was my Betty Neals extravaganza obsession phase. Still love a good Betty Neals book, but I feel like I have now shifted to D.E. Stevenson as being my particular author of choice. I think I read maybe 10 plus of her books in January, so obviously I'm not going to try and go through and talk about every single one of them. I will have a full list of the books by D.E. Stevenson that I have read in the description box below, and I can highly recommend any of them. They were all amazing. I am going to talk about just a few of them quickly. So let me see here. And in case, again, that you are new here, for my reading wrap-ups, I do not count how many books I read each month because I like to calculate that at it's like a New Year's Day treat for me. So on New Year's Day of 2025, I counted all of the books that I had read in 2024. And it's just a fun way. I don't try and hit a certain number of books or anything like that. I just read and have fun with it and then count it all up at the end of the year. So, I started off the year with finishing The Tall Stranger by D.E. Stevenson, which was a really sweet book. It kind of pivoted because it starts out from one girl's point of view and you're like, oh, okay, this is the main character. And then it switches it on you and that's not the main character. She's like sort of a side main character. That one was really excellent. I loved it. It's about Barbie and, well, her name's Barbara, but pretty much everybody calls her Barbie. And she goes to visit her aunt because she's been very, very unwell, and so she goes to stay with her aunt. And while she's there, her cousin comes back and, or no, it's not, it's a little convoluted because if I remember correctly, I don't remember if Barbie was actually the niece or if she was like an adopted niece, because I know that her cousin may have been like an adopted cousin. I don't remember. Anyway, we're just going to call them niece and aunt and cousin for the sake of simplicity. He comes back and they decide they're going to get married, but then some stuff happens and it's hard to talk about some of the D.E. Stevenson's books at times because they're just so lovely and simple, but it's difficult for me at least, to talk about them and make them sound interesting without making them sound kind of boring or giving completely everything away from the book. But Barbie meets this handsome stranger at a wedding, and things happen, things occur. It's a cozy, I'm doing a terrible job of describing it, but it's a cozy English village life sort of a story. There's romance, and it's just beautiful. It was lovely. It was a wonderful way to start off my reading year. And then, yeah, we're just going to quickly talk about the D.E. Stevenson, and then we're going to talk about a couple other books. I read Katherine Wentworth, which is about a widowed lady with 2 children and a stepson. I think that's right. I think there's 3 kids. And she is a single mom. She's widowed, and she is working very, very hard to try and provide and take care of her family. And then they meet. She happens to bump into an old school friend, and then the old school friend invites her back to her house. And then while she's there, she meets her school friend's brother, and lots of lovely things happen. There's bits where there's a Scottish cottage that they go and stay at, which the description of that... Oh my goodness. Again, if you've been here for a while, you know I absolutely love Scotland, so that was really fun. But that one was really sweet. I loved the bits where it was kind of showing like the whole like parenthood and talking about like being a mother, and it's sort of like a second chances romance because her husband had died, but then she meets someone else, and her husband was somebody that she very, very dearly loved. So it wasn't one of those things where it's like the first spouse was like and so then they finally get their true love. It was sort of a second love, and it was really sweet. And then I didn't realize this, but D.E. Stevenson has several duologies, I guess you would call them, where there's like book 1, book 2. That was so fun. I love that. So that's part of why I read so many of them, because I'd read book 1 and I'd be like, alright, now I gotta read book 2. So I read Katherine Wentworth, and then the second book for that one is Catherine's Marriage. And then I read Bel Lamington and Fletcher's Inn, which is a duology. Loved that one so much. Bel Lamington is talking about Belle, and she's living in the city up in this stuffy little tiny apartment that I loved how they described that she had made it really a home, even though it wasn't a very ideal place to live at all. It was stuffy and hot and not a very nice place to live in the middle of London. And she had made it a home, and I loved how they talked about that. It was very inspiring. I love our house, like, don't get me wrong, I think our house is amazing and absolutely perfect for us, but it can be easy, especially in today's day and age with like social media and everything, to see somebody else's house and think, man, I wish that I could live in a place like that and it would be just beautiful. And so it was a nice sort of reminder to, I guess, be more aware of how beautiful my house already is and what can I do to make it match like my dream house, if you will. And so I really love that. But then she works as a secretary in a firm. I feel like I need to reread this one already. I loved it so much. She works as a secretary in a firm, and she's very efficient. She knows exactly how all of the company works. And then her boss has to go off to, I think it's America, for a trip, and then a bunch of stuff starts happening, and the other person there's like different partners, and so the other partner kind of gets a vendetta against her and fires her, and so she's just like, now what do I do? And so then she ends up going to Scotland at some point, because D.E. Stevenson must have loved Scotland. I feel like Scotland is in almost every single one of her books. And then, so yeah, she ends up going to Scotland, and like I said, I don't want to spoil these books, but they're so good. And then Fletcher's Inn is the second one. Belle gets married, and then they are trying to find this house, and they find this house called Fletcher's Inn, and the descriptions of this house, oh my goodness. And I can't remember the name of the lady that lived there, but there's a lady that's like a caretaker that stays there to take care of the house. And they had this description of her where it was something along the lines of she was of a contented nature, and that was just, again, like so inspiring to me, where I was just like, oh, I would love it if I could be described as being someone of a contented nature. Like she just had her home, and she just lived there, and she took care of it, and that was all she wanted in life, was just to have her home, and she was contented. And I just I loved that. But yes, there's lots of descriptions of the house and talking about like fixing it up because it's been neglected by the current owner who's off somewhere else. And it's lovely. It's so, so lovely. Highly recommend you read that. And then I read Amberwell and Summerhills, which is another duology, and that one is set pre-World War II through World War II, and then the second book is well after World War II. This one was a little bit harder to read because it was talking about these children. Like, it starts off with the story of these children who live in this house, and it kind of carries on through when they grow up and through the war, and then on into the second book where there's like some of them have kids, and there was a lot of very tragic things that happened that were handled so well. And there was one character in particular who has a very, very, like, so sad marriage that she's involved in, and that was hit a little close to home in some ways, but it was so good. It was so, so good. I'm not one to read a lot of World War II or just war-related stories in general, just because, especially right now in my life, I feel like I could get into it later, but right now in my life I just feel like I'm extra sensitive to anything where it's just really heartbreaking and horrific and sad and all of that, and so I just don't read a lot of war related stuff. But this one, I felt like it handled it so beautifully, and it was finding the joy in the midst of these horrible, sad, war-torn country situations. And it was just so lovely. I could absolutely read it again. There's a sweet romance in it, of course, and it was just amazing. Amazing. All of them. They're so good. And then I read Gerald and Elizabeth and the House of the Deer. Love those two. They're so good. I read Rosabelle Shaw. I read Sarah Morris Remembers and Sarah's Cottage. That's another duology. And then I also read The Blue Sapphire. That one I read in February. All the other ones I read in January. I read The Blue Sapphire in February, and that one was really good. Just basically, they're all amazing. Like cozy English village life, or they give the vibes of that. Even if they're set in like London, it's still got that coziness to it. So yeah, highly recommend it. I've already read another D.E. Stevenson in March, and I have no intention of stopping reading anytime soon. Although I have gotten distracted by Louis L'Amour again because it's that time of year. So, so I read a lot of D.E. Stevenson. I had quickly I wanted to talk about this book, The Great and Terrible Quest by Margaret Lovett. I read this one in January, I should say. I reread it. I have read this book a number of times. This was one of my all-time childhood favorite books, and it was the first book that I remember clearly that I was just so upset at the ending that it's a good ending. Like, let me assure you there. It's a good ending, but it was so open-ended, and I think that it was one of the first books that I've ever read that was like that open-ended. And having reread it, it's not as open-ended as I remember it being. It kind of wraps things up pretty well, but it doesn't like epilogue tell you like what happens, sort of a thing. And I just remember that I was just so annoyed at it because I had so loved reading it, and got to the end and I was just like, what? But I loved it so much that I read it a number of times, and then I asked for it for Christmas because I love it. I want my kids to be able to read it, and it's actually a little bit harder. This edition in particular is kind of hard to get your hands on, and I don't like the other edition that they've done. The cover art is really ugly in my mind. So I asked for it for Christmas, and then of course I had to read it, and I read it right away, and it's just so good. It's a story of a little boy who is living with his abusive grandfather. His grandfather just mistreats him completely, and he has he's pretending to be kind of stupid, like mentally slow, because then when he does that, then his grandfather is a little bit less pays a little bit less attention to him. So he's doing that, and he's found a little dog, and the dog only has 3 legs, so he's taking care of the dog. And then one day when he's out, his grandfather's out, and so he's able to like actually leave the house and do some stuff. He finds this knight, and well, he doesn't realize at first that he's a knight, but he's a knight, and he's wounded, and so he goes and helps him and hides him because his grandfather is kind of just an evil man. He's just a horrible person, and so he finds this knight and he hides him, and then there's these bad robber guys that show up at his grandfather's house, and they start talking about some stuff, and he connects the dots that they might be looking for the knight. And so then he decides to run away like the next day or something. And so he runs away with the knight and his dog, and they end up, the knight was on a quest. He was on a quest to do something, and he has this horrible head wound. And so he can't remember. Like, he's supposed to be doing something, and he knows that it's a great and terrible quest, but he can't remember what it is. So he and the little boy dresses up as a little girl, and they travel around the countryside as a grandfather and granddaughter. And because the knight has like white hair, like his hair is white, and he can play the lute, I think it is. And so the little boy's dressed up as a little girl, because then his grandfather and the other evil men won't recognize him. And so they go traveling around this countryside and do all this stuff, and they're on this quest. They have to finish something, and it is so good. So good. I know a lot of people, myself included, do not like books where children are harmed in any way. So let me assure you, it is very brief. It's only the first chapter or two, and it's nothing... It's horrible, but it's not like horrific, if that makes sense. Where it's like, you know, I think like the grandfather like hits him once or twice or something, and which again, terrible, but it's not something where it's like torture or anything like that. And the rest of the book is well worth it. Like, it is just so good. It's kind of, I guess, almost like a Cinderella story, where Cinderella is very much mistreated by her stepmother and stepsisters, but then it's like a happily ever after thing. It's kind of like that in the beginning, where it's like he's not taken care of and loved like I assume we would all hope that children are taken care of and loved, but he then is adopted, in a manner of speaking, by this knight, and they go traveling, and it's just lovely. I love it so much, and having reread it again did not reduce the amount that I love it by any means. Highly recommend it. I believe right now there's a thing called Middle Grade March going on. I haven't not had the brain space to pay any attention to that whatsoever, but this would be an excellent book for that. So, now that I've gushed about that, let me look here. Oh, I wanted to briefly mention, I read, just as a random thing, I got a special deal with Kindle Unlimited where I got like 3 months for like $1 or something, and that's how I've been able to read all the D.E. Stevenson. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, there are a bunch of D.E. Stevenson books available on there to read for free, so check that out. But I randomly decided to read One Foggy Christmas by Courtney Keisel. I'm not sure how you pronounce her last name. And I picked this one because it, based off of the description, it's a husband and a wife, and the wife is involved in a skiing accident and loses her memory and can't remember who her husband was. And that's what I read the description of, and I was like, that sounds kind of fun. It's very similar. I don't know if it's based off of the same story as, there's a movie called like The Vow, I think, that has Rachel McAdams and Channing Tatum in it, but that is a similar premise where it's like the wife has an accident and then can't remember her husband. So I just picked it up and decided to read it, and it's divided into 3 parts. And I'm going to have some spoilers here, so overall I would say it was probably a 3.5 to 4-star book for me. I don't typically do star ratings for books because either I liked it or I didn't. I enjoyed it. There were a lot of things that annoyed me about it. But as far as a contemporary romance goes, it was pretty clean. I don't remember there being anything excessively spicy in it. And I did like how it ended in some ways. So if you're looking for a Christmas book to put on your list for the festive season this year, I could recommend it. It would be pretty good. But we're going to have a couple spoilers now, so if you don't want to hear that, I will put it on the screen below. You can just jump forward a few minutes. So, the book is divided into 3 sections. There's a prologue where it introduces, like, the wife waking up in the hospital and being like, who on earth are you? And the husband's just like, I'm your husband. And she's just like, where's my fiance? And you realize that she doesn't remember her husband and she has lost the last 3 years of her life. And then the first section, it kind of goes back in time and shows where the main girl, I'm terrible about this and I forgot to look it up, but the main girl, can't remember her name, is traveling to Chicago to work as an intern in a company. And it starts off with her and her brother. They're at this baseball game, and while they're there, there's this cute guy that starts flirting with her. And then, lo and behold, she finds out the next morning that said cute guy is her boss at the internship company. And so that's how they meet. They're friends and everything, and he tries to be very professional while they're at work. But then after work hours, he's like, I'm gonna flirt with you. And she's just like, I have a boyfriend, like, you can't flirt with me. And he's just like, he's not here, and we're not engaged or married or anything, so you're pretty cute. Which, he's not, and he's very respectful about it. That's the thing that made it okay for me, was that he was not, like, super pushy or anything. He was just like, I think you're very attractive. I think you're a wonderful person, and I would like to pursue that. And he doesn't, like, push her to do anything or whatnot. He's there for her as a friend, and he's a good boss. He tries to be very professional about it, like I said, that he doesn't try to, like, do anything inappropriate whatsoever. Like, nothing. They're just kind of flirty with each other. And then at some point, her said boyfriend shows back up, because, let me backtrack here. Her family and her boyfriend were all really upset with her for going off on this internship to Chicago. They were like, you're being stupid, you should just stay here in our hometown, where her dad has a company that's similar to the company she's interning with. But she was like, as a form of expressing my independence, I want to go and do this for myself and learn more about this professional field that I'm interested in. And so then her boyfriend, that's what it was. She technically doesn't have a boyfriend. He broke up with her. Forgot about that part. So she doesn't have a boyfriend. He broke up with her because she was going to Chicago. And so she was just like, I kind of have a boyfriend. And so cute guy was like, kind of have a boyfriend and having a boyfriend are 2 different things. Just saying. So then all this stuff happened. I would say do check the trigger warnings, because there is, her brother dies very tragically. He accidentally overdoses on, like, painkillers. And it's a super sad situation where it's like, it's kind of her parents' fault. It's kind of her dad's fault that happened. And so she just kind of breaks all ties with them. And at some point, said boyfriend showed back up and they got engaged. But then they broke that off. And so she's back in Chicago and she's, like, staying there for a while to finish out her internship. And so then she and cute guy get in a relationship together, and then they go off and they elope and they get married and all that. And then it jumps forward 3 years to where the accident has happened, and she has no recollection of the last 3 years. She's like, why hadn't I talked to my parents in the last 3 years? Why, where is my boyfriend, fiance? Like, what is going on? And so she's very, like, paranoid and almost a little bit hateful towards her husband, where she's just like, why would I have gotten with you? And this was the part that kind of annoyed me, was where she didn't give herself time to, like, invest in the relationship. Like, she didn't respect the fact that she had a husband and they had gotten married. She just was like, I have no interest in knowing you, basically, and I'm out of here. So they go back to New York, which is where she's from. I can't remember now if it's New York or, like, Connecticut or something. And they go back there, and he comes with her. They're going to stay with her family for, like, a few weeks, and she's gonna move back there. Like, she's going back there because she's just like, I don't know who you are. I'm not staying in Chicago. So they go back there, and like the whole time, like her husband is there. He's trying to like talk to her and woo her and interact with her and everything. And the whole time she's just like looking around for her ex-boyfriend, and that really, really annoyed me. It just felt so disrespectful to like not even try to get back in her relationship with her husband. And then they've been there for a while, and then she basically tells him that she has no interest in him and she wants him to like go away. And so then he ends up moving back to Chicago, and then the next thing she does is she divorces him. And I was just like, excuse me, say what? Like, it's not like he was a bad person. It's not like... She claimed it as needing to be completely untied from any relationship, whether it was her husband or her ex-boyfriend, who as soon as she divorces said husband immediately like tries to get back with her, and she's just like, hold off, that's not what I wanted to do. So I was glad for that she at least was like, nah man. But the fact that she didn't really wait and give herself time, she was like, I just can't be tied by a marriage. And I was just like, that's so nonsensical. That's absolutely ridiculous. Because then, of course, the third section of the book is when they meet back up and they fall back in love and get remarried. And I'm just like... So... It was really annoying in that specific aspect, where she was in such a hurry to get rid of her husband rather than honoring her marriage and being like, okay, I don't know who you are and I need some time and space to reconcile to the fact that I don't remember the last 3 years of my life. I'm all in support of that. That's fine. Have him go back to Chicago and live there for 6 months or a year or something, and you go do your thing with your family and whatnot. But you don't need to divorce him. Like, it's just so silly. So, overall, pretty good book. As far as contemporary romances go, again, I've said this before, it's not my genre of choice, it's not my favorite, but I'll try one every now and then. So that's One Foggy Christmas. And I've blathered so long about that my phone fell asleep. I read a number of different Betty Neal's books throughout January. Let me see. Oh, I read Carousel by Rosabelle Shaw, or I finally finished it. I have a physical copy of it. I think I put it away. But I have a physical copy of it, and so I was slowly working up my way through reading it throughout like December and January, I think. It was okay. It was not my favorite Rosabelle Shaw book that I have read so far, and to be fair, I've only read like 3. It was okay. Yeah, I guess that's the best I could give it, was that it was not my favorite. It was kind of... I felt like it didn't really flesh out the characters super well, and the romance seemed just so... I don't know how to describe it, like, quick. Like, there didn't seem like there was really any chemistry at all between the two main characters. Like, there was and there wasn't. Yeah, I'm still kind of torn on how I feel about it, because it was definitely not my favorite book, and it probably didn't help that I've been reading so many D.E. Stevenson books, which I think were definitely superior to the Carousel, but it was pretty good. If you like Rosabelle Shaw, I think you would probably enjoy it. If you like simple, pretty wholesome stories, like, I don't know exactly how you would describe it, like a light novel. That's what I've seen D.E. Stevenson's books described as. So if you like those sorts of things, you'd probably really enjoy it. But yeah, it was okay. It wasn't my favorite, but it's not going to deter me from reading further Rosabelle Shaw books. We'll put it that way. And then I read The Railway Children. That was a reread for me. Again, highly recommend that one if you need some middle grade March recommendations. It's such a good story. I haven't read it since I was a little kid, and I read it as part of I'm part of a knitting and reading book club with some of my friends, and that was the book that they picked, and it was so good. I love it so much. It focuses on the story of the family. There's these 3 children. Bobby's the oldest girl. And what are the other 2? I can't remember, but it's 2 boys, or 2 girls and a boy. Bobby's the oldest girl, and then there's a boy, and then the youngest girl. And it starts off where they're living with their mother and father, and then something happens, and their father is just taken away, and they have no idea why. And their mother moves them out to the countryside into this like cottage, and she is suddenly having to do a bunch of writing and stuff to provide income for the family. And so it's kind of the different like little adventure stories of these kids and things that happen around the little countryside and the little village that they're living in. And it's just so lovely. It's so nice. Highly recommend it. It has made me interested in investigating, what is it, E. Nisbet? Yeah. Oh, I misspelled it on here. Other books by her, because it was so lovely. Highly recommend it. Really enjoyed it. So good. I think my baby might be waking up, which means I need to run and get him because he's been sleeping on our bed, but he is a little bit too mobile for that, and he's getting adventurous. Yes, so let me go check on him, and then I'll try and quickly talk about like 2 other books. Okay, he wasn't awake yet, but he's waking up, so I need to hurry. I briefly wanted to mention another physical book that I read this year. One of my goals this year is to try and read at least 1 physical book a month, because I have so many physical books on my bookshelf that I bought because I want to read them, and I just haven't gotten to them. I read 99% of my books on my Kindle. Just being a busy mom, it's easier. I read Positive Moves by Angela Lansbury. I was on a real Murder, She Wrote kick in January watching the show, and I found out that she had this book, which is it talks about kind of exercising. It's got like stretches and stuff that Angela Lansbury talks about that she did to stay fit and active, even as she got older. But it also has like a nice section at the beginning that's kind of like a bit of a biography about her. It's got some different pictures and things. Like, it's just highly recommend it. It was such an encouraging book to read, and I am planning to try and do some of her stretching routines and things just for me to try and stay a little bit more healthy as I'm getting older. I'm approaching my 30s, and so I would like to try and age as gracefully as she did. So that one was really good. And then I also read Destination Unknown by Agatha Christie, which is one of the Agatha Christies that I think I had not read yet. I was looking at the list of her novels, and I've read pretty much all of them, but Destination Unknown didn't sound familiar, so I was like, I don't think I've read that one. So I read that one, and it was a bit more of like a spy thriller book, but it was just as good. Agatha Christie is just an excellent writer, whether it's a mystery story or like a spy book. So good. And then February was when I started my Louis L'Amour kick, so I read Dark Canyon by Louis L'Amour. Excellent. I read Dear Hugo by Molly Clavering, and it's I can never say this word. It's written in letter form, and it's a book that I've seen highly recommended. I think people have recommended it in the comments here, or Molly Clavering as an author, and I'd seen Jen from Jen's Reading Life has mentioned it a couple times, and so I was like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna read this one now, and sounds fun. So I read it, and I loved it. It was so good. However, the last bit, the last like chapter or last letter or whatever, was such a disappointment to me, not gonna lie. Like, the ending kind of soured the book for me. Just in that, there's a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, skip forward like 2 minutes. Just in that it didn't have like the romantic happily ever after that I was excited and hoping for and anticipating. It didn't happen, and I was so disappointed. I just thought that it was like it was leading up to that, and then it just didn't, and I was so bummed. So that was the one thing that made it a little bit less of a fun book for me, because I I loved it. Like, again, it's written in a letter format. I love that type of book now. When I was a kid, I hated it. But I loved that, and then it just didn't do the happily ever after that I wanted it to do. So I was a little disappointed. I do need to go and try some of Molly Clavering's other books, because a number of them by the description sound amazing, but I just haven't gotten to them. So I'm excited to delve into her writing a little bit more, and I do highly recommend Dear Who You Go. It was very good. If you like D.E. Stevenson, be sure to check it out. Yeah, I was just a little disappointed. I was a lot disappointed by the ending. And then I read A Winter Away by Elizabeth Fair, which is another, I think they're called like Furrowed Middlebrow books, which I'm not entirely sure why, but okay. And I'm trying to remember now. I read that one, I think that was when we were all kind of getting sick, and so I don't remember it 100%. I remember I enjoyed it, and it was pretty good. But oh, that's right. It's about a young girl who goes to stay with her cousins, her older cousins, in a village, and she works as a secretary for this kind of eccentric guy. And it's, again, English village life. There's a bit of like a family feud with like the cousin, and then her employer's son. Love the ending of it. Excellent ending. It's so hard to talk about these books because they're so simple, and that it's like just ordinary day-to-day like village life, and nothing enormous happens in them, but they're just such cozy, wholesome reads. So I really enjoyed it. I'd like to read some more books by Elizabeth Fair. It was fun. Recommend it. And then I ended the month with Sackett's Land by Louis L'Amour, which is the first book in the Sackett series, and I am currently working my way through the series. I think I'm on book like 7 or 8. 8 maybe? I don't remember. I have read all of them before, but I have never actually made a point of starting with the first book and going all the way through the series. So that is what I'm doing, and I highly recommend Louis L'Amour. As always, I've talked about him a number of times on my channel. Excellent author. If you have any like preteen boys or teenage sons, amazing books to give to them because they are so good. Like, the male characters are like honorable and loyal and hardworking, and they just have all of those like strong men characteristics that I hope that my sons grow into. So I'm very much anticipating being able to have my boys read them when they get older. So highly recommend it for anyone to read, but if you have young boys, young men, they would probably thoroughly enjoy them. So that is all that I have to talk about today. I know that this was a bit of a chatty, longer video because I had so many books to talk about and I didn't even talk about all of them. But I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm hoping to be back next week with a spring books video, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, I hope that you all are having a wonderful, wonderful start to your spring. We've had some gorgeous weather the last week or two, and it's just filling my spring-loving heart with all the joy. I'd love to know what books you are reading, what books you are anticipating reading in this spring season. I love reading seasonally. I'm not very good about it, and it's sort of a thing that I've only recently discovered, seasonal reading. But I would love some spring book recommendations. What are some of your favorite books that you've read or like to read in the spring? And yeah, I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't. And I will see you on the next one. Bye!